Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're tackling Adlerian psychology through this fascinating book called The Courage to be Disliked.
Oh, yeah, I love that book.
It's written as this kind of dialogue, almost like a play between a young man and a philosopher.
Right.
And they just go deep, really exploring how we can actually, find real happiness.
Yeah.
So that we could dive into some of the meatier ideas today.
Absolutely.
Like, is feeling inferior always like a bad thing?
Mm.
Or does the whole idea of, trauma actually hold up under Adlerian psychology?
Right.
And this big one, can we actually choose to be happy, right now?
Yeah. I mean, that's the core question, isn't it?
It is. So I'm really curious to hear, how does Adlerian psychology actually approach these things? What's different about it?
Well, one of the most interesting things about it is that it doesn't dwell on the past in the same way that a lot of other psychological approaches do.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of, trying to find the root of your current problems in your childhood or past traumas, it really focuses on your goals.
So it's kind of like, instead of looking back, it's looking forward.
Exactly.
Almost like turning a telescope around, huh?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's like, instead of searching for the causes in the past, it's like, what are your actions right now aiming at?
Okay.
What are you moving towards, even unconsciously, with your behavior?
I see.
The book gives this really interesting example of a man who hasn't left his room in years.
Oh, wow.
And, he claims that he wants to go outside, but there's always something holding him back.
So, the more traditional approach might be to, delve into his past, look for some sort of, childhood trauma.
Exactly.
That's making him afraid to leave the house or something.
Exactly, yeah. But Adlerian psychology would ask, what if staying inside is actually achieving some goal that he hasn't admitted to himself?
Oh, okay. So, he's getting something out of it, even if he's not consciously aware of it.
Exactly. It could be, avoiding social interaction. It could be about maintaining a sense of control. It could even be a way of getting attention from his loved ones, right? And the point is that this perspective, this way of looking at it, is actually really empowering.
How so?
Because if our behavior is driven by goals, even unconscious ones, then we can change those goals, which then leads to actual change.
So it's not about being a victim of your past.
Right.
It's you have the agency to choose different goals and actually shape your future.
Exactly.
That's pretty powerful. But this book, it really challenges some of these traditional views, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It even says that all problems are ultimately interpersonal problems. That one, I have to admit, I kind of struggled with.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, on the surface, it sounds a little extreme, right?
It does, because how can every problem, even something like a physical illness, be interpersonal?
Well, it's not necessarily saying that the illness itself is caused by relationships, but more about how we're experiencing it, how we perceive it. So, in the book, they give this example of a woman who was terrified of blushing. I mean, debilitatingly afraid of blushing in public.
Right.
So at first glance, it might seem like it's just a personal, maybe physiological problem.
Yeah.
But when they sort of dug a little deeper, what they found was that her fear of blushing, it was actually preventing her from doing certain things, from engaging in social situations.
That was really impacting her relationships.
Exactly.
Especially with, I think it was a man that she was interested in, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't the blushing itself that was the problem. It was the fear of how other people would perceive her.
I see. So it's about the meaning that we're giving it.
Exactly.
And how that then affects our interactions with other people.
Exactly. And this brings us to this really important idea in Adlerian psychology, which is the idea of life tasks.
Oh.
They see work, friendship, and love as these fundamental tasks that all humans have to navigate.
Makes sense.
Right. And in this woman's case, her fear of blushing was making it real.
It could make him more, approachable or relatable. And I remember, reading that and just being like, oh my gosh, yes. Because I've always...
It's so true, isn't it? And what I think is so fascinating is how this connects to the idea of the superiority complex.
Oh.
Because sometimes when we're trying so hard to appear superior to others, it's actually a way of masking our own deep insecurity.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. It's like we're trying to compensate for something that we feel is lacking in ourselves.
So maybe next time we're tempted to judge someone else, we should ask ourselves, what's this judgment really saying about me?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
About my own insecurities. It's all of this anxiety that we have about, wanting to be liked and approved of. it leads us to this really interesting and maybe kind of challenging idea in the book, which is the importance of being disliked.
Yeah, that one's a real head-scratcher at first.
It is, but it's really about freedom, isn't it?
It is. It's about recognizing that if we're constantly seeking validation from other people, we're not really free to be ourselves, and we're not free to pursue our own goals.
Okay.
And the philosopher, he even argues that things like praise and rebuke, those can actually be forms of manipulation.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, it's less about, encouraging someone's autonomy and more about trying to control their behavior.
That's such a different way of looking at praise, you
Yeah,
know?
right.
It makes you kind of question those seemingly positive interactions.
Definitely.
I'm thinking about the philosopher's relationship with his father.
Yeah.
They had this really kind of troubled relationship.
Yeah, a lot of tension there.
And for years, he blamed it all on his dad.
His dad's strictness, yeah.
But then, through Adlerian psychology, he had this realization that he was actually holding on to that resentment as a way to, avoid taking responsibility for the relationship. Yeah. So he was stuck in this cycle of blame. And it was only when he finally accepted the possibility of being disliked by his father that he could actually break free and start to heal that relationship.
It's a really powerful story about how letting go of that need for approval can actually be incredibly liberating.
It is. So, okay, if it's not about seeking approval, then what is the key to happiness, according to this book?
Well, they introduce this concept called community feeling.
Community feeling. It sounds kind of warm and fuzzy,
It does, but it's more than just being surrounded by people. It's about this deeper sense of belonging.
Okay.
And knowing that you're contributing to something larger than yourself. They use this simple but really profound example of buying a loaf of bread.
Oh, yeah, I remember that example.
Right.
It really stuck with me.
It highlights how, even this mundane everyday act actually connects us to this huge network of people, right? The farmers who grew the wheat, the bakers who made the bread, the delivery drivers, the people at the store, all of them.
And it's not just about the people we see. It's like this whole web of interconnectedness.
Exactly. It's recognizing that we're all part of this bigger picture.
Right. And the book breaks community feeling down into three interconnected pillars, right?
Yeah, the self-acceptance, confidence in others, and then contributing to others.
So it's not just about taking, it's about giving back.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is that these three things, they actually reinforce each other.
Oh, how so?
Well, if you can accept yourself, flaws and all, then you're more likely to have confidence in other people.
Yeah.
And when you have that confidence in others, you're able to contribute more fully to the community.
Right.
And then that, in turn, strengthens your own self-acceptance. It's this beautiful cycle.
It makes you wonder if, a lot of our unhappiness comes from feeling disconnected. Disconnected from ourselves, but also disconnected from, other people. This idea of, living in the present moment, it seems like a big part of Adlerian psychology as well. Not dwelling on the past, not worrying about the future.
Absolutely. They talk about the difference between a kinetic life, which is focused on some distant goal in the future, and an energial life, which is all about experiencing each moment fully.
Oh, I like that.
And they use this analogy. I love this analogy. They say life is like a dance, not a linear journey.
A dance. That's so much better than a straight line, right?
Right. Instead of just fixating on the destination, it's about enjoying each step along the way. So it really begs the question, are you postponing your life? Waiting for the right time to be happy? Or are you allowing yourself to dance through each moment?
I love that image of dancing through life. It's so much more freeing than marching towards some, predetermined goal.
Right. It's about embracing the journey, the music, the movement, even the missteps along the way.
Yeah. And sometimes, the missteps lead to the most interesting parts of the dance.
Exactly. That's where the creativity and the spontaneity come in.
I think that's a great place to maybe take a little break. We've covered a lot of ground here with these foundational ideas in Adlerian psychology.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface.
But I'm already feeling a shift in perspectives. Instead of searching for answers in the past, I'm starting to see the possibilities in the present moment.
That's the power of Adlerian psychology. It really invites you to take ownership of your life and create the dance you want to be dancing. It really is a powerful way of looking at things, Instead of waiting for happiness to just kind of show up someday, you can actually choose to be happy right here, right now.
I love that. But, sometimes it's I'm stuck in this rut, just going through the motions. And I know the book talks about workaholism, how that can actually be another way we avoid really living.
Yeah, it can be this this trap, where we think we're being productive and dedicated, but really we're just avoiding other parts of our lives.
Like those life tasks we were talking about.
Yeah.
Friendship, love, all that.
Exactly. It's like we're afraid to really engage with those things, so we just bury ourselves in work.
So it's not that work itself is bad. It's more about, like, the underlying motivation.
Right. Are we really passionate about what we're doing, or are we using it as a shield to protect ourselves from something deeper?
I've definitely been there. Convincing myself that working late is all about, dedication, when really it's just me avoiding dealing with some personal issue.
It's so common, though, isn't it? This idea of defining ourselves by what we do instead of just who we are.
The whole being versus doing thing.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, like, what happens when those people are forced to stop, to just be?
That's a scary thought for some people, I think. It's like they're putting off their lives until retirement, which may never even come.
And that brings us to what I think is at the heart of Adlerian psychology. The courage to be happy.
The courage to be happy. That sounds almost paradoxical. Like, shouldn't happiness just be this natural state?
You'd think so, right? But the book tells this incredible story about the philosopher's first encounter with these ideas. He went to a lecture by this really prominent Adlerian psychologist, Oscar Christensen.
Okay.
And Christensen, he just straight up said, anyone who listens to this talk can choose to be happy right now, but those who don't, they'll never find happiness.
Wow. That's a pretty bold statement.
It is. Almost sounds like something a snake oil salesman would say, right?
Totally. But I guess it really shook the philosopher up. Like, he realized he'd been so busy analyzing happiness that he'd forgotten to actually, experience it.
And that's where Adlerian psychology really diverges from a lot of other approaches. It's not just about dissecting the nature of happiness. It gives you a very clear definition. Happiness is the feeling of contribution.
That's it? Just contribution.
That's it. It's about feeling like you're a part of something larger than yourself, that you're making a difference in the world.
So it ties back into that idea of community feeling.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be these grand gestures,
No.
It's the everyday things, the small acts of kindness, the ways we connect with each other.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about people who can't actively participate in society, like people with illnesses or disabilities?
Yeah.
Can they still experience that feeling of contribution?
Absolutely. Their very existence, their being in the world is a contribution. They're still a part of the community, and their presence matters.
So it's not just about what we do, it's about who we are in relation to others.
Right. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, even when we're not actively doing something.
That makes me think about the difference between self-affirmation, which we hear a lot about these days, and self-acceptance, which this book really emphasizes.
That's a really important distinction. Self-affirmation is more about convincing yourself of your worth.
Okay.
Focusing on your strengths and accomplishments, which can be helpful sometimes, but it can also create this kind of fragile sense of self-esteem, like you're constantly needing to prove yourself.
Whereas self-acceptance is more about acknowledging both the good and the bad, and just accepting yourself as you are.
Exactly. Warts and all, it's a much more peaceful and freeing way to live, I think.
I agree. But if we're not always striving to be better, does that mean we're giving up on self-improvement?
Not at all. In fact, I think self-acceptance is the foundation for real growth. Because once you can accept yourself fully, then you can start to focus on what you can change and let go of what you can't.
Like you're not fighting against yourself anymore.
Right. And this connects to the idea of unconditional confidence that Adler talks about. It's about trusting others, not because they've earned it, but just because it creates a healthier dynamic.
And it goes hand in hand with taking responsibility for our own choices and actions, right?
Absolutely. The book is really clear about not falling into the trap of blaming others for our unhappiness.
Oh, I know. I've done that plenty of times.
It's easy to do. If only my boss wasn't so demanding. Or if only my parents had raised me differently. Right?
Literally, those exact words have come out of my mouth.
But that's what Adler calls the life lie. We're avoiding responsibility and giving away our power.
Okay, but what if you're actually stuck in a really difficult situation? Like, what if you have a toxic boss? How can you take responsibility when it feels like something outside of you is controlling your happiness?
Even in those situations, we always have choices. We can try to change the situation. We can seek support. We can choose to leave.
So it's about recognizing that we're not just victims of circumstance. We have agency.
Exactly. And that freedom, while it can be empowering, it can also be kind of scary.
How so?
Because the courage to be happy, to live in alignment with your values, it often means the courage to be disliked, to be misunderstood, to stand out from the crowd.
It's like breaking free from all those expectations and choosing your own path.
Exactly. And that path might not always be easy or straightforward.
But it's yours.
It's yours, and that's what makes it meaningful.
You know, the book talks about what it calls the greatest life lie, which is this belief that our lives should follow this straight line, this predetermined path.
It's the illusion of control. Like, if we just plan everything perfectly, we can avoid pain and failure and uncertainty.
But as we've been talking about, life is messy. It's unpredictable.
It's more like a dance, with all its twists and turns and improvisations.
And sometimes those unexpected moments are the most beautiful parts of the dance.
Exactly. That's where the magic happens, when we let go of that need for control and embrace the unknown.
It reminds me of the story the philosopher tells about how he stumbled upon Adlerian psychology. It wasn't part of his plan.
Right. It was this chance encounter that completely changed his life.
Life has a way of doing that, doesn't it? Leading us down these unexpected paths.
It's about being open to the journey, to the dance, with all its surprises.
So it's not about having all the answers or planning every step. It's about being present, being open, being willing to dance.
And that, I think, is the true courage to be happy, to let go of that illusion of control and embrace the messy beauty of life.
To dance to the music that moves your soul.
Exactly. And that music, it's going to be different for everyone.
Well, I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up our deep dive into Adlerian psychology.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
I hope this conversation has inspired you to take a look at your own life, maybe try out some new steps in your dance.
Remember, you are the choreographer. Choose your music, find your rhythm, and dance with joy.
Wow. Yeah, when you put it that way, it really does make you think about what kind of dance am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
You know, what's the music? Am I enjoying it?
Yeah. Are you leading? Are you following? Or are you just kind of stuck, doing the same steps over and over again?
And maybe even more importantly, like, is this even the dance I want to be doing? Am I creating a life that feels, authentic?
Yeah. A life that brings you joy, that feels meaningful.
I think that's what we've been talking about today. This courage to be disliked, to be normal, to be present. It's all about taking ownership of our lives and making it a dance that we actually want to be a part of.
It's about being the choreographer of your own life, right?
Exactly. And the book, it talks about this idea of the greatest life lie, this belief that our lives should just follow a straight line.
Like it's all planned out and predictable.
Yeah, like if we just work hard enough, follow the rules, we'll reach some perfect destination.
Right. But as we've seen, that's not really how life works, is it?
Not at all. It's more like, a dance with all those unexpected turns and, improvisations.
Those moments where you trip up, have to adjust your steps, maybe even change the music entirely.
And that's where the magic happens, when we let go of that need for control and just embrace the unknown.
Right, because that's where we find the new possibilities, the new connections, the new rhythms.
It's like that story the philosopher tells about how he discovered Adlerian psychology in the first place. It wasn't part of his grand plan.
It was a total accident, right? He just stumbled upon it.
Yeah, and it completely changed his life. Life just has a way of leading us down these unexpected paths.
So it's not about having all the answers. It's about being open to the journey, to the dance.
To the music, to the movement, to the missteps. It's all part of it.
And I think that's the real courage to be happy, to let go of that need for control, to embrace the messiness of life and just dance.
To dance to the music that moves you. That's such a beautiful way to put it.
And I think that music, it's going to be different for everyone. What moves you might not move someone else, and that's okay.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up our deep dive into Adlerian psychology. What a fascinating and honestly inspiring conversation.
It really is a different way of looking at the world.
It is. And I hope everyone listening has found some new steps to try out in their own dance of life.
Remember, you are the choreographer. Choose your music, find your rhythm, and dance with joy.
恭喜你又听完了一本书，订阅以便不错过更多精彩节目，也别忘了分享给你的朋友，一起快乐听书学英语。